Welcome back to the Conscious Monogamy series. Today we're going to be looking at what does it look like to actually consciously engage in community or social dynamics in a monogamous relationship. And to be honest with you, a lot of these concepts can also apply to really just anyone in a primary partnership who's living together. But I want to look at monogamy because I don't hear a lot of people talking about conscious monogamy. When you're doing non-monogamy, you kind of have to do it to some degree outside of the box that was kind of given to you. But with monogamy, it's so easy to fall into that little mold that society lays out for you, but also inevitably leads to disconnection. It's kind of a crazy time on earth when the default paradigm is a paradigm of disconnection, right? And so if you care about lifelong relationship, you have to relate consciously. It is essential because anytime you're kind of unconsciously drifting into the mainstream, it's not going to go well. I hate to say it, but it's true. So I'm going to share with you 3 characteristics of the mainstream paradigm, the unconscious monogamous way of engaging in a relationship. And then we're going to look at the other side of the equation. So what are 3 conscious ways to engage with the community, engage in social dynamics as a monogamous couple? So let's get into it. If you're deeply committed to your relationship, but keep getting pulled into the same reactive loops that feel disconnecting, you're not alone. I'm Forrest Williams, certified relationship coach, and I guide devoted couples to untangle the unconscious dynamics that get in the way of intimacy and quietly erode connection over time. Here, we explore conscious relating as a spiritual practice, where your relationship becomes a sanctuary for healing, growth, and a steady source of joy instead of struggle. Let's start by defining what is conscious monogamy, and this will just be a brief recap because I already covered this in the first one, but if you're joining right now, you don't have to listen to these in order, it's totally fine. The idea with conscious monogamy is that it's authentic. It is what is true to you, what is true to your partner, and what is true to the two of you as a couple. Because the default way, it is a paradigm of enmeshment, codependency, there's a lot of control sprinkled in there. That's the mainstream norm, and we'll call it the unconscious way, unconscious monogamy. And so conscious monogamy is all about actually very explicitly deciding what is true for you. And honestly, it's not so much deciding what's true for you, it's distinguishing, okay, this is the programming I got indoctrinated in, and this is my actual truth. So it's more of you actually just tuning into yourself and letting the truth come to the surface, and your relationship is going to look different than any other relationship you know, because all relationships are unique. There is no way to commodify it, even though the mainstream tries to. And why is this important? Well, if you just do the thing that society kind of lays out for you, that little formula of this is what it means to be in a relationship and this is what it looks like, it's going to make the relationship wobbly. It's going to be less resilient over time, and it will very quietly erode the relationship, honestly. You might still be together at the finish line, but you might be having a really hard time. You might feel way more disconnected than if you were doing things consciously and doing things according to your truth, not just trying to cram yourself into the societal mold. So let's look at what does it look like to slip into the default unconscious norm that leads to disconnection in the context of engaging in community as a couple. And then we'll look at the other side of it too. What does it look like to engage in the community in a very conscious way? So for context, I have history of monogamy and non-monogamy, and I've held space for all kinds of clients in all kinds of formats of relationship. And this is what I notice, okay? These are just my own observations, take them or leave them. There might be something I'm missing. Let me know in the comments if you're like, yeah, you're missing something. Totally open to that. And I'm just sharing 3 things with you. I'm sure we could come up with a huge list, but let's just keep it simple. It's a good starting place. So the thread here that all 3 of these things have in common is the theme of jealousy and control. What I notice is let's talk about unconscious monogamy. The default mainstream paradigm is that most monogamous couples actually don't feel secure in their own relationship. And as a result, you'll see them limiting who they can have contact with. There's this idea of control because, let's give one example. In the mainstream world, which I'm very far removed from, there's this idea of like, oh, you can't be friends with the opposite sex. That's not a real thing. That's impossible. Disagree. But we're talking about unconscious norms. So, that is a paradigm that many people believe in. And so maybe your partner is saying, who's this male friend that you're close with? I don't like that. You're not allowed to hang out with Joe anymore or whatever. Unconscious paradigm where your partner is perceiving a threat in the relationship. Well, what if you and Joe start something romantic, right? Assuming it's like a straight relationship or maybe same sex. I don't know. Maybe it's your partner's a guy and you're a guy. It doesn't really matter. But the idea is that your partner is feeling threatened by a friendship that you have. And they're like, well, what if this friendship will escalate into something romantic? What if you leave me? That's what it always comes down to. And as long as you're coming from that place where you're not feeling secure and you're relating to that not feeling secure unconsciously, you're going to exert control. You're going to use some veto power and you're going to tell your partner who they can and cannot hang out with, which is a recipe for disaster. Doesn't create the opportunity to build trust. And it inevitably leads to resentment over time. Because a core tenet of conscious relating, and really conscious monogamy in this context, is maintaining sovereignty in the relationship. Like, yes, you're in a partnership and you're a team and you can talk through things and you can decide things together, but not at the expense of losing yourself. That's key. So on the flip side, in conscious relating, when you're feeling insecure in the relationship, maybe some jealousy comes up. I know for me, there's this one person in particular who my partner hangs out with sometimes where I'm just like actually super jealous. Honestly, like everybody gets jealous. It's a natural emotion, right? But the key is, how do you show up to the jealousy? Do you go unconscious and you say, no, you're not allowed to hang out with this person? You control your partner? Or do you reflect? Do some shadow work around the jealousy. What is this actually bringing up for me? What am I actually afraid of here? More often than not, you could say, oh, I'm afraid you're going to leave me. I'm feeling threatened. But what about it though? A big part of this reflection process is actually having the ability and the skill to be with your emotions, which is also very countercultural. It's also a tenet of conscious relating is self-reflection, self-attunement, emotional awareness, your ability to sit in the discomfort of the body sensations that come up. And if that's something you're wanting support with, I have lots of classes and workshops and all kinds of things that involve somatic processing, like actually helping you feel your feelings and understand what it means and actually how to move forward from it. So check out my website, go to the events tab, see what's coming up. consciousrelating.org. There's a link in the description below. Anyways, half the battle is acknowledging you're jealous. Oh, I'm feeling emotional. Oof. The second part is taking the space and the time to feel the feelings, because that's the only way you're going to get answers. And you might not understand right away what the tension in your chest means. Or maybe you're feeling jittery in your arms, or maybe your throat is swelling up. You're like, whoa, I'm so jealous. Or you might even get hot in the cheeks. It's kind of different for everyone, depends on the situation and the person. You're not always going to know right away, like, oh, this is why I'm jealous. This is what's going on. But it starts with that curious inquiry. Can you be with what is present so that you can later make sense of it? But if you can't even be with what's here, you can't open the door to understand what's going on. You have to start by opening the door before you walk through it. So you allow your feelings to flow. And then you maybe do some journaling. Maybe you talk it out with a friend or a therapist. Or even, like for me personally, sometimes I leave voice messages to myself and I listen to them and it really helps me process. Or even like videotape myself if I'm not feeling like journaling. And then I like delete it afterwards. But I'll like watch it back And then I can really understand like, oh, that's what's going on, you know? So there's a million ways to be with what's coming up and to reflect on it. But that's the idea. You just want to understand what's coming up and where is it coming from. More often than not, it stems from something in the past, some kind of insecurity that's actually not in present time, but it's a fear that you don't want to happen again, maybe a pain that you experienced in the past. The next piece I would recommend is get really clear on what is the fear? What is the specific scenario? Is it that your partner's going to lose interest in you? Or is it that maybe it's like an ex, right? Your partner is still friends with an ex, which, by the way, it would never in a million years happen in the mainstream paradigm with unconscious monogamy. But in conscious monogamy, that very well can happen because your partner is an autonomous person. And if you trust them, they can hang out with whoever they want to. But if your partner's hanging out with an ex, the fear might be different. It's like, well, what if you fall back into sexual chemistry, even if you don't act on it? I just don't want to feel like I'm being disrespected, like you're engaging in this space where you're indulging in that energy. Maybe you're not physically touching, but maybe in a way it feels like a betrayal. If you're like, well, I know you have sexual chemistry with this person, and I know you're probably going to flirt together and whatever, you know, maybe it just feels unsettling, right? Maybe the fear isn't like, oh, I don't think you're going to leave me or cheat on me. I don't feel great about you engaging in that sexual chemistry with someone else, even if you're not acting on it, right? So it's going to be different according to the scenario and the person, but that's what you want to get to is like, what are you afraid might actually happen? And then the thing you bring to your partner, you can share the fear. But really, you want to share, what do you need underneath that? Do you need some reassurance? And by the way, your need has nothing to do with controlling the other person. It has everything to do with you and like, what do you need to feel secure in the relationship? Maybe you make an agreement together. Like maybe, for example, you can clarify the parameters of your relationship. What qualifies as cheating and what doesn't? Does hanging out with someone who you have sexual chemistry with, even though you're not acting on it, does that qualify as cheating? You know, that could be a need. It's just to create a clear parameter for the relationship. But what's important here and what doesn't make it control is that it's a mutual agreement. So the need is going to look different according to every scenario. That's just one example. But that's the idea. You want to pause, reflect, feel your feelings, understand what am I afraid might happen, and what does that fear need? Maybe you can meet some of that need. Maybe it's you like self-soothing and self-regulating, you communicating with your partner in a conscious way, saying, hey, I'm afraid and I have a need. That's part of a need that you can meet for yourself. But then there's this collaboration where you're like, hey, I'm feeling tender. Can you meet me in my tenderness? You know, that's the whole idea. So you're naming a need and you can both collaborate on, well, what would it look like to meet that need? So I want to draw the line here between the idea of control, where you're demanding something. You're like, this is what I need, and you must do it in this way at this moment. That's not really collaborative. And so that drifts into the paradigm of control. It gets a little shadowy. The whole idea here is that you're communicating and you're collaborating. You're being vulnerable in your emotions, and in a conscious relationship, your partner will hold you in that vulnerability. They don't need to be responsible for your feeling, but if they care about you, if they love you, they're going to care about how you're feeling, right? And they're going to emotionally attune to you, and the two of you can figure it out together. How do we facilitate security in this relationship without control? That's conscious relating. And it's very countercultural because it requires relationship skill. In the mainstream paradigm is a world where war is the norm, right? And so all these unconscious war energy is like seeping into relationship without you even realizing it, right? And that's where that control comes in. It's like a war paradigm. A lot of control in war, right? So the idea is to do something not mainstream because that doesn't work. And that does require skill, but you can learn these skills. That's the nice thing about conscious relating. It's very possible. Just take some practice. And that doesn't have to be perfect. It's a process. So that's the first thing, is when you get jealous, you control your partner and you say, no, you can't hang out with this person. And, that just feeds more insecurity, because the way that you actually start to feel secure is by giving your partner autonomy, honoring their sovereignty, allowing them to be an individual person with their own friendships, right? Like, you don't control who your partner socializes with. And then every time they come back to you, that is the thing that deepens trust, right? Because in a conscious partnership, you're choosing each other every day. You're choosing each other over and over and over again. You're not together because the relationship is being duct taped together by control and limitation. Like, if you don't have the trust to let your partner socialize on their own terms, then that's also not going to build trust in your relationship. Whereas if you're feeling jealous regardless, and you say, okay, I feel that urge to control because I'm jealous and I'm afraid, but I'm going to reflect, do some shadow work, understand what I'm afraid of, communicate what I'm needing. That is how you build trust and how you build security, even with the jealousy being present. Do you see the difference here? So that's the first piece. It's exerting control, saying, no, you can't hang out with this person because you're jealous and you're insecure, which just feeds more insecurity and erodes your relationship over time, because resentment slowly will kill your relationship. The second characteristic of engaging in community from a paradigm of unconscious monogamy is where you primarily socialize together. So maybe it's not 100% entirely, but maybe it's like 90, 95. It's getting pretty high up there. What I see, and this is just a societal phenomenon, I don't think it's anyone's fault. It's just, if you're asleep and you're on your default programming and you're not waking up and being conscious, you're just falling into the societal norm, which is you kind of seclude yourself into the nuclear family structure. You and your partner live together, and you primarily only socialize with each other. Like, the bulk of the socializing in your life happens in your home. And then, you go out, you have mutual friends, but you're still socializing together. Like, you're never really like doing things on your own. You're kind of relating as a unit or as one entity rather than two sovereign people within a partnership. Does that make sense? In contrast, in a conscious monogamy paradigm, you can socialize together. That's natural, right? Because you're choosing each other. You're building a life together. What can you do, right? And you're naturally going to have mutual friends, but you're consciously choosing how much overlap is there between communities. And like, maybe the preference is different for everyone, but it is really important to maintain your sense of self, to maintain sovereignty in the relationship. And a big way of doing that is having a life outside of each other as well. So it's not that you're keeping secrets from each other. It just means you're not 100% enmeshed, because that is also a recipe for disaster. In the previous episode, I talk about how enmeshment can really kill your sexual chemistry. I'm not going to repeat that now, but if you want to know more, you can listen to the first one. And actually, I'm going to be making an episode upcoming about sex. Like, how does unconscious monogamy manifest in the context of sex? And then what does conscious monogamy look like in the context of sex? So if you want to follow the series, make sure to subscribe and click the bell for notifications so you can stay in the loop, because I'm going to continue on this thread and posting various themes about conscious monogamy. So the second thing is that you primarily socialize together, and it's that enmeshment, right? Like, you don't have a sense of self in your social life. It's the two of you as a couple have a social life, and so you lose your sense of self. That's the unconscious paradigm. In a conscious paradigm, there's trust and there's sovereignty. And so within that trust and that sovereignty, you have the freedom to have individuality within the relationship, to have friends that are just your friends. Doesn't mean they're not allowed to meet your partner or they're never going to meet your partner. It doesn't have to be extreme like that. It just means that you have a life outside of your partner. Your partner is not your entire world. They can still be at the center of your world without making your entire world be them. You know what I mean? You're not losing your sense of self in your partner. You can maintain your sense of self, and your partner can maintain a sense of self. It's really good for your sex life. Okay, and the third characteristic of engaging in community from a place of unconscious monogamy is that you really primarily only spend time together, which I've kind of already said a little bit, but what I want to emphasize here is this sense of hyper dependence on each other. We could call this codependence, which is a primary tenet of unconscious monogamy. But what I'm pointing to here is this sense of isolation from community in general, which is a US norm. I know in the US it's pretty bad. Like the sense of isolation, you can see it in the way society is structured. You have to have a car to drive everywhere. If you look at suburban kind of layouts, it's designed to be all divided and separate. Whereas when I was living in Latin America, the infrastructure is way more community oriented. It's way more walkable. Depends on where you are, I'm sure. I know Europe is like that as well. There's places I haven't been to. I don't know what it's like, but I know in the US, the infrastructure is pretty bad. Like you feel fucking isolated because society is designed to isolate you. So, it's hard to go against the mainstream when the infrastructure is going against you. But what we're doing here is looking at what does it look like to relate consciously? What does it look like to relate unconsciously? And there's no shame in this. It's so common because you just fall into it because you live in an infrastructure that encourages it. But we're still going to look at the difference because it still applies. It's conscious and it's unconscious, right? So this third characteristic is actually just being isolated from community. So instead of interdependence, it's an emphasis on, let's say, hyperdependence between you and your partner, codependency. And society is kind of designed to just have you live with your nuclear family. And so that is a big part of it. So something that would be really countercultural is living in community, living in village. And I know it's not always accessible for people financially, or maybe you don't have the network or something. But what I do know is literally every single person I talk to has the same dream of living on the land in community together, because that's actually ancestral and it's really healthy. I don't mean to say healthy as like a judgment, but I mean healthy as in it's aligned with human nature. That's how we're designed as humans. We're very social creatures and we find safety in community, So that would be the countercultural thing. And I'm not there yet, right? But I have that vision and I hope to get there eventually. But in lieu of that, it could be also like living close to friends or living close to family, even if you're not next door neighbors, like within the same neighborhood or at least a 5-minute drive or something. And there's a lot of back and forth. I have this memory of being in, like elementary, middle school. And my friend who I was the closest with at the time, she kind of had like an open door policy in her home, which I thought was so cool. It was kind of the opposite of how my home was. I really had to like beg to have friends over. I wasn't really allowed to that often. But my one friend, like the whole neighborhood would hang out at her house. And there was always like snacks on the table and stuff. And they weren't wealthy. They were just like very community minded, And that was so cool. So I think of that as like this open door policy where it's the energy of community, even if it's a nuclear family home, But it's like the energy of how much are you interacting with the community? When you're sick, your partner, of course, is going to care for you because they are in the most proximity and they are the most committed to you specifically. You have this conscious partnership of like, hey, let's commit to each other and be there for each other. But also, like, how much are you allowing community to pour into you in those moments? I've had moments where I'm sick and I have friends from all different neighborhoods, same city, of course, like stop by and drop me off soup or, drop me off, I don't know, like one time I was menstruating and then, this was my partner. So, but it's still a good example. This is when we were long distance. So my partner had somebody deliver to my apartment a hot water bottle to like soothe my womb, like put some heat on my womb. That was so nice. But that's the idea, right? It's like, how much do you allow the community to pour into you? How much Do you allow yourself to receive from the community? And then, of course, giving as well. There's been many times where I'm a good cook, okay? So I am known to leave my friends some like really nourishing like miso ginger soup when they're not well. Like I know what to put in that soup to make it medicine, you know? It's a huge love language for me, sharing food. I really like that. But that's the idea, right? It's the idea of interdependence, giving and receiving on a larger scale than just you and your partner. And this could look all kinds of ways. Maybe it's like having a potluck every Friday. Everyone comes to your house, or you go to someone's house, or you go to the park or whatever, you know. I was visiting this little eco village for like a couple weeks, and every Friday they had potlucks. It was so cool. It was very community oriented, like such a good vibe, you know. But, you know, that was a monogamous couple who was hosting that. So the idea is, are you only allowing you and your partner to support each other, or is your support network expanded beyond just you and your partner, right? Because that is the difference between actually being resilient and being part of the future, what we're calling in like beyond capitalism. Because there's a reason why the housing structures are designed to be nuclear family structured and everything so isolated. It's because it's profitable, man. Like the 1% are really profiting off of our isolation, because then we have to pay to fill in all the gaps. We're feeling chronically under-resourced. But when you're able to expand your support network beyond just you and your nuclear partner, ooh-wee, it's so abundant, you know, so much more in balance. And it's very conscious. It helps the relationship because it takes some stress off the relationship. Like you don't have to hold all that on your own. So that's the third thing. It's interdependence with the community rather than falling into that rut of hyper isolation, let's call it, or hyper codependence, only relying on each other and not leaning enough on the community, or not even pouring into the community enough. So I want to leave you with a couple of reflection questions for you and your partner to sit with together, because half of conscious relating is actually making a conscious agreement. Because if you're not making a conscious agreement, what you're doing is you're defaulting to an assumption or an expectation. And where do those come from? They come from your past. They come from the environment around you. And that's a war paradigm, okay? So the conscious thing to do is actually talk about this and agree to, how are you relating with each other? What's unique to you and your partner? What is unique to your dynamic? So 2 questions I want to leave you with. So the first reflection question I have for you is, what are your needs and your preferences around socializing without each other? And it actually could be interesting to start with, what are your expectations around socializing without each other? Because expectations come from your past, or they come from the environment at large. Expectations are not conscious agreements, right? So starting with expectations could be interesting, because that is doing some shadow work. It's like, well, what is the default that I've inherited? What unconscious expectations am I going into this with? And then from there, you can list your preferences individually. And then like, what are your needs around that too? And then from there, once it's all laid out on the table, you can make this conscious agreement around, you know, what's the relationship culture you want to have? How do you socialize as a couple? But particularly, how do you socialize without each other as well? Second reflection question is, again, start with noticing if you expect your communities to overlap 100%, because that's the unconscious paradigm, unrealistic. And that enmeshment, it's not great for sexual chemistry. Like you need some individuation. You need to maintain sovereignty in relationship. So assuming that you're not falling into the unconscious default, what percentage do you want your communities to overlap? Make it a conscious choice. Doesn't matter what you choose. I'm not saying like 80% is the conscious way. No, I don't feel attached to what you choose. But the point is to make it conscious, to make a choice and to come to an agreement around that choice. So for different couples, it's going to be a different number, because people are unique and they cannot be commodified. Relationships cannot be commodified. So choose for yourselves. How much do you want your communities to overlap? That's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know in the comments which part of this are you already doing and which part of this do you want to be doing more of? Like for me, if I could be living in Village, I would be living in Village, but we'll get there. If you're resonating with these concepts, you might be interested in my signature course, The Conscious Couple. It's a 4-month course designed to help you implement these concepts, maintain sovereignty in relationship, and make sure that your bond continues growing and deepening over time, rather than very slowly and unconsciously drifting into the norm, which inevitably leads to disconnection. You can learn more about that on my website, consciousrelating.org. If you join the waitlist, you could save hundreds, so you want to check that out. And if you're curious about that, want to make sure it's right fit for you, I do have a taster coming up in May. It's a 4-week course called Love Without Losing Yourself. It's all about maintaining sovereignty in your relationship so you can continue nourishing your relationship over time. Just because you got married or made a lifelong commitment doesn't mean that's going to carry you to the lifelong relationship, right? Like, you want to do some proactive shadow work to make sure you don't start drifting away from each other, falling into those unconscious norms. So this is really going to help you do that in a much smaller commitment. Again, you can learn more about that on my website, consciousrelating.org. And there's also a link in the description below. And I also do offer couple sessions. So if you're looking for more personalized support, you can also check that out on my website, consciousrelating.org. Thanks for being here. Peace be with you.